Good evening. My name is Amy Scoggins. I'm the Financial Aid Director, and again, I'd like to welcome you to Southwest Georgia Technical College. We know your time is valuable, and so we appreciate you spending some time with us this evening to learn a little bit more about our college and just the whole process for financial aid. So I'm going to kind of give you some general information about how to apply for financial aid, whether you're coming here or going somewhere across the country, and then some more specific information about the type of financial aid that we offer and just what the steps are to take and the timelines and those kind of things. So hopefully this will just help you understand the financial aid process in general. So this is just kind of an overview of what I'll be talking about, kind of the who, what, where, when, how, and why of financial aid. So I'm going to start with just the financial aid process. I'll give you a visual here in just a minute to kind of see the cycle of the application process for financial aid and all the steps that are involved in that. And then we'll talk about who has to apply for financial aid, who is involved in that process, what types of financial aid, how and where to apply, and then just some other important points to remember about your financial aid. I'll try not to linger too long on all of this, but it can get kind of detailed as we get into different types of financial aid. But the financial aid application process starts up here in the top right corner with a student submitting their financial aid application. And the whole process basically revolves around the FAFSA application, which you may have heard that term before, FAFSA. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So that's the federal application for financial aid for students to go to any public college or university. Most private institutions use that as well. The main thing I want you to remember there, it is a free application. That's in the title of the application, is it is free. It is an online application, but please make sure you don't ever get stuck on a website that's going to try and charge you to submit your FAFSA, because it is a free application, okay? So the student submits the FAFSA online, or maybe the parent is helping them. They submit their application. It doesn't immediately come to the college. It goes to the Department of Education Federal Processing Center, where they process it through their system. That process generally takes 3 to 5 days. Okay, when you submit your FAFSA online, you'll get a confirmation saying, congratulations, you may be eligible for XYZ. That's just preliminary based on the information that you put on your FAFSA, but it has not yet been processed. So within generally about 3 to 5 business days, it'll be processed by the processing center. When that's done, they generally will send you an email if you included your email address on your FAFSA. And so they'll say, okay, your FAFSA is processed, it's available for your school to download. But then you're still waiting on the school, which is the next step on there. At Southwest Georgia Technical College, we generally download files once a week. Sometimes it's twice a week as we're getting ready for fall semester to start, but throughout the year it's generally once a week. So when you get that email from the processing center, then you know that within a week we will receive it in our office, and then you'll be hearing from us about your financial aid. Now, when the processing center is processing it, goes through, of course, all their computer programs, and I'm sure it's really complicated, and they have very complicated formulas. And so they're taking all the pieces of information that you put on the FAFSA, putting it into a formula. They're going to determine your EFC. Your EFC is your expected family contribution, and that's a federal term. But that EFC number is going to determine what kind of financial aid and how much financial aid you're eligible for. The processing center is also going to determine if you're selected for verification or not. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit, about who gets selected and what that means. But that all happens at the processing center. So once they've got you processed, then the college will receive your application in our weekly download. So then you can see there's a break-off. If you're selected for verification, we will notify you. We rely on student email at Southwest Georgia Tech. So we will send an email to your student email and your personal email if we have that on file, but your student email is going to be the official means of communication. We do also send letters in the mail with any handouts that we need if you are selected for verification. If you're not selected for verification, then it goes into the middle there, in the middle box, and that just means that you're not selected, your application's good to go. We'll go ahead and process your application, determine what aid you're eligible for. If you've already been accepted into a program of study, we'll go ahead and send you an award notification. It's going to tell you to log into your Banner web account, and then you can see exactly how much financial aid, whether it's federal or state aid, that you're eligible for. So if you are selected for verification, we notify you by email and through the mail. Then it's up to you to submit those documents back to our office. Okay, so once we've notified you, it's up to you. The student has to be responsible to get those documents back to us with all required signatures. Then the verification process takes place. And so what that means is our office reviews your FAFSA application. That's the information you put on there, how you answered those questions. And then the verification documents, we just have to match those up. So we have to say, okay, you put this much income earned from work on your FAFSA, but your tax return says something different, or your W-2s say something different. You could have mixed the numbers up. Maybe you looked at the wrong line on the tax return. The verification process is just a checks and balances kind of thing to make sure that the financial aid is processed accurately. And so we'll match that up. If there is an error and we need to make a correction, the college and in the financial aid office, we will submit that correction and it'll go back to the Federal Processing Center. And so then the cycle starts all over again, okay? Anytime we make a correction, it's always possible that the processing center could flag it for something else. Sometimes if the student put their Social Security number wrong on their FAFSA when they did it the first time, and then they'll bring us their Social Security card, and then we submit a correction to correct it, it could trigger something else. So occasionally students will say, well, how come you didn't tell me I needed all these forms up front? It's because we didn't know. You know, we tell you what we need when we know that we need it, but as we make other corrections or as we see conflicting information, then we may have to make other changes or collect more information later. If no correction is required, if your FAFSA was accurate when you submitted it, then we just go back there into the middle, we process the application and determine how much and what types of financial aid you are eligible for. And so this cycle repeats every year. You need to apply for financial aid every year prior to fall semester. And so you can kind of see it's just a cycle, but this is going to take place at least once a year for college students. So who has to apply for financial aid, or who should apply for financial aid? Everyone that wants to enroll in college should apply for financial aid. Even if you think, well, my parents made way too much money, there's no way I'm going to qualify, or whatever situation's going on in my finances, there's no way I'm going to get financial aid. So even if you know you're not eligible, I would still encourage you to apply, just so that the FAFSA application's out there if it needs to be used as a reference for other types of aid. Okay, so who is involved in the application process? Obviously the student, but when you're talking about financial information, who do you have to include on there? It's going to depend if you're married, if you're not married, if you have kids or don't have kids, how old you are, all those kind of things. So the student obviously is involved. If the student is married, they have to include the spouse's information on there as well, so their financial information. If the student is considered dependent, they have to include their parents, and we'll talk more about which parents have to be included in just a minute. The Department of Education Federal Processing Center is involved. I just said that they're the ones that are going to determine your EFC. They will notify us if you're selected for verification. Georgia Student Finance Commission. This is the agency, the state agency in Georgia that administers the HOPE program. So for HOPE Grant, HOPE Scholarship, the Accel programs, Georgia Student Finance Commission, they're also going to receive your FAFSA, and then they'll let us know what kind of HOPE funds you may be eligible for. And then obviously the college is involved in this process. So who submits information? Who has to be included? This is going to hinge to a large degree on whether the student is considered dependent or independent. And it's not as clear-cut as you might think sometimes. A student may think, well, I'm 21, I've been living on my own since I was 17. Unfortunately, unless they meet these criteria, they're still going to be considered a dependent student. These are the criteria to be an independent student. The student must be 24 years of age. So they could have been out of the parent's household for years, but if they're not 24 yet, they may still be dependent. If a student is married, that makes them independent. Okay, then it's just going to be the student and their spouse that we're looking at. If the student has a child and they financially support the child, they have a job, they're making enough money to provide a household for them and their child, that makes them independent. Active duty military students and also veterans. So if you join the military right out of high school and you're now a qualified veteran, then you're considered an independent student. And then also students who already have a bachelor's degree. Now, if you already have a bachelor's degree, you're not going to be eligible for any financial aid that we offer, but that makes you an independent student. So otherwise, if none of those criteria apply, the student is going to be considered a dependent student. So if you're a dependent student, you must include your biological or adoptive parents' information, okay? Even if you've been living on your own since you were 16, paying all your own bills, regardless of the relationship between the student and the parent. Sometimes there can be some kind of dicey situations, and if you have questions about that in your individual situation, you can always give us a call and we can talk to you about your situation. But in general, you must include your biological or adoptive parent's information. If a student has a legal guardian other than the parent, if grandparents are raising the student, they just need to talk to us about that. But the only other person but the student and their spouse whose information you would include would be the parents. You would never put grandparents' information or a legal guardian's information on the FAFSA. For dependent students, obviously if mom and dad are married to each other, that's pretty clear cut. You include student and you include mom and dad's information. So this can be their tax information, their personal information. If mom and dad, your biological parents, are not married to each other, if they're divorced, then you would include the parent who provided the most financial support during the past 12 months. So if you've been living with mom, you would include mom's information. If mom is remarried, then you have to include your stepfather. So whichever biological parent you're using or adoptive parent, if that person is married, you have to include the step-parent as well. And that includes their tax information. When you submit the FAFSA, it is an online application, and so you've got to sign it one way or another. And so they have a PIN process where you get a PIN number, like you have for your ATM card or whatever. But so the parent and the student have to have their own PIN number, which will serve as their electronic signature when they submit the FAFSA. And the website's on there to get a PIN. When you're on the FAFSA application, it will also prompt you to apply for a PIN number if you don't already have one. If you had one maybe a year ago, but you haven't used it and you don't remember it, you can go to the PIN website and request a duplicate PIN, and it'll show you or tell you or email you what your PIN number is, or you can just get a new one. Okay, so what information do you have to include on your FAFSA? For independent students, you're going to include your personal information. So it's going to ask for your name, social security number, date of birth, citizenship, address, that kind of thing. So you have to include that for the student, and you have to put your marital status. So if your marital status has changed recently, you also have to put the date on there. So if you recently got married, you put the date that you were married, the month and the year. You're also going to include your tax information, which is going to be your adjusted gross income, your income earned from work, exemptions on your tax return, income tax paid, all those kind of things. Dependent students, you're going to include all that same personal information for the parents as well. So for both parents, or for parent and step-parent, you'll be including social security number, date of birth, email address, regular address, marital status, and then all that same income tax information. So how do you apply? I've said already this is an online application. It's really pretty simple. It's gotten much simpler every year. They really streamline the process and make it very easy. There's a help and hints box on there that'll tell you exactly what they're looking for. And now they've even added an IRS data retrieval tool. So you actually don't even have to go home and dig out your tax returns. If you just go to the FAFSA and you get to that part and you agree to do it, it will take you into an IRS website, and then it'll automatically transfer in your tax information. So then you don't even have to worry about, did I get the right line? I'm not sure what my adjusted gross income is, or which line is the income tax paid. It will automatically transfer all that information from your tax returns. The website is right there. It's fafsa.gov. Remember, I mentioned this is a free application, so just always make sure you go to the .gov website, not .com or .net or .scam or whatever, because there are some websites that'll try to charge you $80, and I don't know if they'll actually submit your FAFSA or not, but please don't get stuck paying to submit a free application. The federal school code for Southwest Georgia Technical College is listed there at 005615. So you have to have that for any school that you want to apply for. And you can list up to 10 institutions on your FAFSA. And so all 10 of those, if you put 10 schools, will receive your FAFSA and be contacting you about what else you need to do. And then again, the IRS data retrieval tool, the student and the parent can do this. You both can do it, or one or the other can do it. If only one person filed taxes, then you could use the IRS data retrieval, and the other one would not have their information to put on there. If you do the data retrieval, it's going to reduce your chances of being selected for verification. So it's going to streamline the process. Basically, this is going to tell the Department of Education that your information is accurate because it came straight from the IRS. So they know it's accurate, we know it's accurate, It'll reduce your chances of being selected. If you are still selected for verification, you won't have to give us your tax returns. And actually, we can't accept your tax returns anymore. You would have to get a tax transcript from the IRS. But if you've done this IRS data retrieval, you won't have to get that for us either. We'll already know that it's accurate, and we can skip that step. Okay, this is just a screenshot of the FAFSA website. If you go to fafsa.gov, this is what you're going to see. And so if this is the first time you're applying, you would click on the Start a New FAFSA, the big green button there. If you have applied for a FAFSA before in the past year or two, you can click on as a returning user if you still remember your PIN number. I believe the PIN numbers are good for up to 18 months, so if it's been longer than that, you might want to just do Start a new FAFSA. If you are selected for verification, or you've heard about this before, or you've had to go through it either with us or another school, why am I selected for verification? Some students get selected every year, some manage to get through without ever being selected. I will tell you, over 50% of applicants for financial aid at our institution are selected for verification. So chances are, sooner or later, if you're going to be coming to school here, you will be selected for verification. I mentioned earlier the Federal Processing Center determines who is selected for verification. For some students, it's just random. They just want to kind of make sure and kind of spot check that everyone's information is accurate. The purpose of the verification process is just to make sure that the federal funds are awarded accurately, that eligible students are receiving them, that we're not, giving money to students who are not eligible. Some students are selected because there's some unusual information. Something just looks a little off. Sometimes if a student puts, I made $20,000 in income and I paid $20,000 in taxes, that's probably not accurate. And so if that's, what you put on your FAFSA, you'll probably get selected for verification. Sometimes if there is a significant change from the previous year, if you did a FAFSA one year and you only had 2 people in your household, and now you say you have 7 people in your household, you might get flagged for verification because it just might look a little questionable. Maybe you made a keystroke error, maybe it was a mistake, or maybe there are valid reasons, but they just want to double check and make sure everything's accurate. But it can also be random, so it does not mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean you're going to, have a big audit or anything like that. It just means you'll have to provide some documentation to us. And so if you're selected, the student and the parent or the spouse would have to submit the IRS tax return transcripts to the institution. Like I said, if you did that data match, you won't have to get the tax transcripts. Usually then it's just a simple worksheet that you fill out for us, and then we go on from there. Depending what you put on your FAFSA and what they flagged you for, there may be some other forms that we need to complete verification, and we'll send those to you. You can also print them off the college website or through your Banner web account. If in our office, when we're reviewing the verification, we're processing it, if we see any kind of conflicting information, we're required by federal regulation to resolve that. So a lot of times marital status will come up. They list mom as single on the FAFSA, but then they list a stepfather on the verification worksheet. That's something we have to resolve. So anything that looks conflicting, we may have to come back and ask for additional information from the student or the parents.